Is artificial intelligence making a hostile takeover of the workplace? It's a really important question and one I will be digging into today. And you may be asking, who are you to answer that question? Well, I am Christopher Lind, and professionally, I am an industry analyst, advisor, and HR exec. On the personal side, I am the husband and father of 7. But all that to say, I live my life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. And today, to help answer that question, I'm actually going to be unpacking LinkedIn's one of their most recent future of work reports. And this one's specialized in artificial intelligence at work. So I'm going to be breaking down some of the key things that I think came out of this and giving some additional context from what I'm seeing in this. Now, the first thing that I want to do before I really get into the report itself is for anybody who takes a look at research or sees some of these things that get cited and things out there, it's really important to break into the data and actually understand where some of these reports and research things are coming from. I'm actually really impressed with LinkedIn and the reach they have. It's no surprising given the size of their network and all this stuff. I mean, they do some really robust stuff. So when you look at their data sources, they've got 900 plus million in 200 countries. So 900 plus million people in over 200 companies. And they actually have, if you look at, I'm trying to think where it is here. If you look at it, they actually have a skills taxonomy of like 121 different skills just in AI. So when you think about, hey, who are they actually pulsing, and is this a robust survey or data set that they're pulling from? They've probably got one of the biggest that I know of anyway. On top of it, they also have a couple other things that are going into this report. They have their, I think this one's bi-weekly. They have a workforce confidence index. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can download the report. I'll put the link in the comments if you want to actually get your hands on the report itself. But they do this bi-weekly thing, goes out to about 3,000 to 5,000 members, digging into some of their things. And that's US based. But then they also have an executive confidence index that's 5,000 people every quarter. And that's only to people who are VPs and above. So you're getting a pretty broad stroke, look at who are they actually looking at when they do this. So when you look at the data and the statistics that they're pulling into here, it's a robust set. Now, is it completely comprehensive? Is it conclusive? Should you be making decisions? This is my one caution to people when it comes to reports like this. Should you just be making blind decisions about what you're doing because you saw in an analyst report, this is what they said, so therefore I'm going to do it? Absolutely not. And I would caution anybody from making decisions like that. However, can well-structured, broad, big reports like this give you some really meaningful insight to help you make wise decisions about where things are going and the things that you should be watching out for? Absolutely. And the point of this video is to hopefully take that one level further and take my own experience and some of the things I've been through and add another layer of context to hopefully help balance some of these things out. Because there's some really good stuff in here. There's also some things I think it's worth people recognizing, like, you might want to go beneath the surface before you just respond to this. So I'm not going to go through every single slide, but I did take the time to go through and process everything in here and see there are some areas I want to lean into. So the first one I want to jump to actually is on the 5th page here. And it talks about the just meteoric rise. It actually references the meteoric rise of interest in AI. And I think we need to be really careful about the hype. There is a major hype cycle going on right now. And while this whole report is focused on AI and everyone's talking about AI and it's all over the place, we do need to be really cautious about this because, first of all, one, AI is not new. It's been around for a long time. And it's been making changes. It's been in the air we breathe, the water we drink for some time. So we got to be careful that, this is meteoric, right? Everybody's got to get in. And I'm actually seeing a lot of that hype cycle play out right now where people are feeling this overwhelming pressure to just participate in the AI craze that's going on just because it's a craze. So we need to be careful with that. And even what this is talking about, it's talking about this meteoric rise, but it's talking about the fact that, okay, we're seeing keywords in jobs and profiles. So that means on LinkedIn, there's been a meteoric rise in members including AI keywords and skills in their profile and the kinds of jobs that are being posted, including keywords and phrases and things related to artificial intelligence. So that makes sense. Everybody right now wants to be on the bandwagon. There is a big difference between saying on your profile that you're doing something with AI or referencing something related to artificial intelligence, putting it in a job description. Does it necessarily mean that this role specifically works with artificial intelligence? Does it mean that just because this person has artificial intelligence listed on their profile, that they have deep knowledge and actively work with artificial intelligence? No. So I think it's important that when we see some of these stats and we look at things about this rise and the craze and everybody's doing it, that we filter some of that down and go, well, hang on a second. Just because it's everybody's talking about it, people may be using some tools that now have artificial intelligence. They might have been using those tools before and they just didn't realize it was artificial intelligence. So we just really need to be careful. So when you look at some of these things and you go, whoa, 75% since the start of this year. Well, okay, yeah, the start of this year, OpenAI unleashed ChatGPT and everybody started talking about it and things like that. So I would say, yes, there's a lot of attention on it. Yes, a lot of people are talking about it. Yes, more people are engaged with and using artificial intelligence than they were before. But is it quite the meteoric rise that the report, kind of states? I personally don't know that I would go that far. I think something else that's really important to look as we look into this is we know there's a lot of unknowns. A lot of the activity around artificial intelligence, as we look at this, it's still unknown. If you talk to most business executives, and I'm in the HR space, a lot of the HR leaders that I work with, they're still figuring out how artificial intelligence is going to play into jobs and play into the activity and play into work. So there is just this increased pressure to talk about it, whether or not it's actually having an impact on things. And so I think we just need to be careful about it. But if you look at this even here, in 2022, the fastest growing AI related skills, these are extremely technical skills. Question and answering, classification, recommended systems, computer vision, NLP. Those are highly technical skills. So is AI creeping into every single job? Not necessarily at the growth that I think some of this is indicating. At the same time, I think it is very much becoming more prevalent. Every company I'm talking to is actively exploring where this makes sense and how to use it. And, if you look at some of the statistics here, I mean, about half of the executives believe that it's going to increase productivity. So there is an optimization around, and there's around half who are planning on increasing the use of artificial intelligence. So there's a little less certainty on whether or not it's going to unlock future revenue. Now, I think that number should be a little bit higher. But again, you've got to keep in mind, this is still very early stage, but these are some significant leading indicators that artificial intelligence is not a trend, and the proliferation of it being in work, changing the way work is done, and all of these things is definitely there, and it's not going away. And so the report has a comprehensive enough data set to be able to pretty conclusively say, hey, this is going to have a significant impact in the near term and the long term. I would just caution people when you look at some of these things to not get too caught up in some of these statistics about how just significant we're seeing this exponential growth in every aspect of everybody's profile. Everybody's doing it. I say be careful a little bit there in terms of what that actually means and what that looks like. Now, I want to jump forward to slide 8 and talk about what does it really, really mean? Because this is a little bit more eye-opening in terms of, okay, where does the rubber meet the road between talk and yes, people are using tools that probably had artificial intelligence incorporated into them before, didn't realize it. Maybe it's a little more front and center versus, hey, who's really deeply involved in artificial intelligence work? And you can see that by the statistic over here that in 2016, 3 out of 1,000 job roles would be considered AI talent. I mean, that means they truly are talent that specialize in artificial intelligence. So 3 out of 1,000 members on LinkedIn out of that huge pool of people would have been considered artificial intelligence talent. That's 0.3% of jobs in 2016. If you look at what it is in 2022, that's jumped to 17 out of 1,000, which again, is that exponential growth? Absolutely. So this talk of artificial intelligence is going to create new jobs. Yeah. And this data seems to support that to go from 0.3 to 1.7%. That's a significant rise in the course of 6 years. So when you really think about it, that's significant. At the same time, sometimes when there's these hype cycles, there is this overwhelming pressure for everyone to feel like they need to get on the bandwagon. And I need to go back and get a master's degree in machine learning or something like that. I mean, that might be an extreme case. But sometimes that kind of pressure can lead to those kinds of decisions. And what I think this data is showing is that while, yes, artificial intelligence and the jobs it's creating and the new opportunities it's creating is significant and is starting to eat into some of that market share, it's not so much so that everyone should feel the need to do this. And an area where I saw this before, this isn't the first time this has happened, it wasn't even that long ago, where this was similarly happening to coding. For a while, it was, oh, everybody needs to learn coding, and kids, every child needs to learn how to code, and every adult professional should be taking basics in coding and computer science so that they can do it. And I actually cautioned some folks and talked people out of it. I was coaching because I said, I actually would caution you against this because you may be building some very particular hard skills that the technology itself may actually obsolete. And interestingly, you'll see when we get to this point, artificial intelligence is actually one of those technologies that is very much doing that. So again, I would just caution people, if you're looking at this and you maybe are feeling pressure to say, hey, I really should get on the AI bandwagon and maybe I need to do some AI skills, how far you need to go with that, I would be careful. Because again, you're still talking 1.7% of jobs, I guess, technically, if you were to look at the LinkedIn data, are heavily involved in artificial intelligence skills. Very, very small percentage. Now, if you've listened to any of my other content, you know full well that I think every single job on the planet will be changed and disrupted by artificial intelligence. So regardless of what role you're in, should you be exploring the possibility of how artificial intelligence could change things, where it may be used, things like that? Yeah, absolutely. Should you be upskilling yourself in things like prompt engineering, knowing how to interact with large language models on a basic, yeah, you should be building some of those skills. Do you need to go get a graduate degree in machine learning and AI? No, I don't think that should be a path. That should be a path for a select few. So, but I just wanted to call that out because I do think this statistic in particular really does help highlight, okay, how much are we really talking about here when we say specifically AI jobs? Now, this is what I'm going to be watching over the next few years. I'm curious to see with that 1.7%, what it looks like in 2024 or 2025 as we move forward. Will we continue to see that upward trajectory? I don't know. I would predict we likely will as it continues creating new jobs that technically may not even exist today. So 6x growth over 6 years, it's pretty significant. Okay, jumping forward to slide 10, I thought this was an interesting snapshot of how you're looking across the AI skill index across countries. So this is more of a global look at Again, just because a skill is in a job description or in someone's profile, does it necessarily mean that they are doing active AI work or deeply entrenched in it? Not necessarily, but we can glean some insights from this in terms of, okay, so where are there areas or countries that are really leading the charge in this? Largely you see a lot of things clustered, but you are starting to see some real separation here as we move forward. I thought it was really interesting seeing Singapore so much higher. For anybody who watches or listens to this, I am very curious if anybody has insight into what may be contributing to that. What is going on in Singapore that either they're feeling the need to densely populate their profiles and jobs with artificial intelligence, or is there really something under the surface going on in Singapore where they're really leaning into the possibilities of AI that we should be watching out for, not in a negative way, but watching like, are they going to be a real innovator in where artificial intelligence goes? The leading countries were Singapore, Finland, Ireland, India, and Canada. Those are the top 5 that you can kind of see what I would say jumping above the line. I would say the rest are staying pretty close to that. I really think Singapore is the one that jumps off the map. The US, surprisingly, as much as the United States talks about our forward thinking, we're the leader in technology, really when it comes to artificial intelligence, we landed right in the middle of the road on this chart. So a little bit of an interesting perspective on how globally we're seeing artificial intelligence play a role in people's jobs and the jobs that are being posted, things like that, which might it be an indicator of where we might see some interesting innovation coming out. I personally know that I'm familiar with a lot of companies in the Nordic region, so it didn't surprise me to see Finland up there. I also wasn't surprised to see India up there. Canada, Ireland, those ones caught me off guard. Singapore as well. But again, if folks listening or watching to this have insight, I'd love either comments or you can email me directly. Would love to hear what you think or what you know may be contributing to some of that, because I personally don't have direct insight. But it was interesting nonetheless. When it came to the actual industry look, this was a little bit more interesting to me. I mean, not necessarily more interesting, but it was a different, grabbed my attention for a couple reasons. So there's 2 aspects of this. There's the chart and then there's the industry snapshot. Now, I was not surprised in the industry snapshot to see that the tech and media market have the largest share of folks with AI skilled members. So going back to that chart I just referenced before, where 3 in 1,000, then jumped to 17 in 1,000, it doesn't surprise me that the tech industry and the media industry would have the largest share of folks with those skills. I was surprised that individuals in the education space were right up there, though. They were actually right up there in line with the statistics before of 17 in 1,000, almost spot on. Education was 1.2, then be 1.2%. The average statistic before was 1.7. So pretty close there, which is a little bit interesting because if you look at the chart itself, education is actually at the bottom of its, I'm trying to think like the industry wise. So if you look at this industry snapshot on the text itself, it's talking about members, kind of attributing this. Then what the chart is doing is actually taking LinkedIn's massive data set and saying, okay, let's segment all these members by industry. And then let's see where these different industries fall. It was no surprise to me at all that financial services and finance were at the top, just given the fact AI is so phenomenal at the kind of analytics and data processing that it can do, its ability to look over massive, massive amounts of data and be able to come back with insights, things that people may be able to do. I'm not surprised whatsoever to see finance jumping all over that one, which is why you just have this, you want to use meteoric rise, right? No surprise that you would see a meteoric rise there. At first, when I saw retails jump like that, I thought it was a little bit interesting. But then the more I thought about when it comes to retail, one of the biggest things that is so challenging in those industries is trying to plan the logistics of all this stuff. Where do we need, how do we predict what goods we're going to need in what markets and when, and how do we find the quickest path to get there? How do we become more predictive in figuring all that out? An awesome use case for artificial intelligence. So after I thought about it and reflected on it a little bit more, it made perfect sense to me. To the education industry, little disappointing, especially that's my bread and butter. Little bit disappointing to see that in terms of where the industry is, we're at the bottom of the rung there. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between people who would consider themselves educators and putting their skills as AI related skills, and then the industry itself and its use and perception of artificial intelligence and the prevalence we see of that. Little bit of a disconnect there. I think we can do better. Personally, if you listen to any of my content, you know I see so many opportunities for artificial intelligence to democratize knowledge, skill, capability, and personal development. I don't know that we're necessarily seeing that come to life yet. And that's just been my personal experience as I advise and work with a lot of these tech companies in the education sector. As I look at what's going on in the education market, a lot right now in this hype cycle of the artificial intelligence application is around perpetuating iterative improvements to what we've done in the past, which is why I would say see and agree with it. Doesn't surprise me education is lagging in this. Not a whole lot of groundbreaking, disruptive usage of artificial intelligence in the space. I think we're going to see that catch up. To those of you listening, if you're in the space to influence that, I absolutely think there's a lot of rich opportunity, both economically and just for the benefit of people as a whole. So I'd love to see purple rocket to the top. I think it should. I think there's short-term uses. I don't even think we need to wait for some of this hype or this maturity to come into play for us really to do it. I think it's just a matter of there's a bit of a legacy mindset around education that I think personally is contributing to this. Because again, another area I'm trying to look here at the report, but even healthcares and hospitals, which healthcare tends to be a laggard in this space, is falling behind or is ahead of education. And I think that's where I just see so much opportunity in the education space, as well as healthcare, which is where I've spent a majority of my career at the intersection of education and healthcare. Disappointing for me to look at that and see that we don't have that upward exponential arc like some of the other early adopters, who I would say are probably maximizing the potential and disrupting their industries through the tech. I think there's lots of opportunity for that in the healthcare and education sector. Really disappointed to see education at the bottom, but not surprising to say the least. Okay, for those of you looking at going, okay, but what does this mean from like an executive standpoint? How are people thinking about it? What are the potential implications as we look at the report? Something that I was really encouraged by in this one was the fact that 51% of executives are genuinely excited about it, but they don't know what to do with it. And that matches my anecdotal experiences in the conversations that I have with executives from around the globe. There is still a large degree of hesitancy. So I wasn't surprised to see that it's only about just over half who are excited. There is still a lot of hesitation. There's still a lot of unawareness. As much as AI is prevalent and a lot of people are talking about it, there is still a lack of awareness for a lot who are going, I've heard about it. I don't really know much. I'm not really putting a whole lot of thought. If you're listening to this and in that category, I would strongly recommend you get in the game. This is a game that's not going away. It'd be like being in the late 90s and going, that internet thing, I don't really know if I want to get on that bandwagon. Who knows if it's going to stick around? I feel like it's the same kind of thing now where, no, you don't need to be making big plays. And even the ones who are excited largely don't know quite yet what they're going to do with it, but they are in that raising their awareness, raising their skills, figuring out how this impacts their strategies. I would encourage anybody who's not in that camp to move into that camp and to move into that camp quickly, because there is so much opportunity for this. I mentioned earlier, still more hesitancy around whether it's really going to lead to increased revenue and productivity. Again, that makes sense given the fact that a lot of people are still going, I don't really know how I feel about this or where it's going to go yet. Naturally, you would conclude that if only 51% of people are excited and still a little bit unsure what to do, but generally excited, of course, you're going to have less that are convinced it's going to improve productivity or all this other stuff. Still a lot of skepticism out there. And so even of the confidence, I would say that's where you're seeing some of this. But one of the really encouraging things that I think everybody should pay close attention to is the fact that only 4% of senior leaders in companies are looking at reductions in headcount and the workforce as a result of AI. So a lot of this narrative that's booming out there about the fact that, oh, AI is taking jobs, people need to be afraid for their longevity, their ability to be taken care of, will they have a job next year? I honestly, and this is again, mirrors my experiences and in the conversations I'm having with executives from companies all over, that very few, it is the minority voice of people who say, yeah, we're going to do this and it's going to cut back on how many employees we need. Usually, honestly, in the conversations where that minority voice has spoken up, most of the reactions that I see are looks of confusion, like, that's your response to this? Like, you're thinking this is going to do away with people? And again, some might go, well, how, if it's automating all this, if it can do the capability of multiple people, how does it not lead to reductions in jobs? And what I would say, just from the conversations I'm in and just even some of the things I think about, I don't know a single executive at any company that looks across the landscape and says, we're doing everything that we could do. I don't know a single one. Every single senior leader that I know knows that there is so much more they could be doing. There is so much inefficiency in the systems that they have. They see so many opportunities they'd love to reach out and grasp, but they know they just don't have the resources or the capability to do it, which very much is why I think you're seeing so much, hey, this is actually going to lead to more opportunity, more jobs, more work for people to be able to do, not less. And so, yes, it's still early. Yes, only 51% are excited and still unsure what to do. So are we really saying, well, everybody's on board and only 4% are seeing reductions? No, that wouldn't be an accurate statement. But I think largely what I'm seeing and hearing is this is going to create more opportunity for people. Now, the balance to this, and I want to make sure that I hit on this for anyone who's listening, if you think that, oh, good, only 4% are potentially considering reducing headcount, I can just keep doing what I do, business as usual, and be fine, I would caution you right there. That's where I think that statistic could be misinterpreted. And you could look at that and say, oh, great, people aren't seeing this as a reduction, so I'll just go about and keep doing what I've always done. That, I think, is putting you at risk. As I said earlier, is every job ripe for disruption? Do I fully believe that there are going to be jobs that are disrupted? Is every job going to change in some capacity as a result of artificial intelligence? Yes, I do believe it will. And so if you're just sitting in a state of complacency, might you be at risk? Yes. Might your job itself be at risk? No. But what might end up happening is you might find yourself in a position where leadership's looking and going, this individual is not performing what I know could be performed if they were partnering and maximizing the capability of artificial intelligence in terms of that role. Therefore, they're not performing. We're going to replace them with someone else in that same job, but someone else who's more forward thinking, who's doing things differently, who's maximizing the possibilities of the latest in tech. And so that's where I would say for everybody, Go watch some of my other YouTube content and you can see some of the recommendations I have for people for, so what do I do about this? How do I prepare myself to do that? But so just that's my only caution in the other half of that coin of, yes, it's fantastic that largely executive leaders are recognizing, hey, AI is not about wiping out your workforce. To the workforce, be careful that you don't think that that means, oh, so I can just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll be fine. That would be a cautionary tale. So that's that one. Flipping forward to 14, something that I thought was really interesting on this is I'm always really interested on where people are from a readiness. So we just looked at the executives in companies. About half are excited about the possibilities of artificial intelligence, even though they aren't quite sure what to do. But then it's like, okay, if that's what they think, then what does the actual general population think? And they're actually pulling some of this from Microsoft, LinkedIn's parent company, their work trend index, which by the way is another really robust one. You want to check that one out. Download this report and you can link directly to it. But I was extremely encouraged to see how receptive the masses are to the tech. Well, I'm going to couch that. I'm encouraged and cautious at the same time to see how excited people are to adopt artificial intelligence. It doesn't surprise me though. There are a lot of people, over 2/3, who would be willing and would like to delegate as much work as possible to AI. This doesn't surprise me given some of the other research reports that I read that talk about where we are in terms of burnout, and the overall mental health and well-being of employees is at, honestly, in my lifetime, a low that I have not ever seen. And so it's not surprising that just almost out of desperation, people are going, good grief, if AI can come in and do this, I am more than happy to do it. I will give my cautionary side to this in a second. But again, I'm encouraged by that. So it makes sense when you look at the state of work right now. People are burned out, they're exhausted, they're expected to do more than ever. They've been through a pandemic, their whole world's been disrupted. AI can almost feel like a cool glass of water of, oh, finally something to come help me with some of this. It was also interesting to see where the breakdown is of the different kinds of things they're willing to allow it to do. So 3/4 are like the administrative stuff, gladly take it off my hands. But it's not just that stuff. People are more willing to use it, almost 80% on analytics, even creatives. And I know some really phenomenal creatives out there who are excited about what AI is allowing them to do, the pace it's allowing them to work at, the opportunities it's opening up. I have a good friend who's a designer, and he's a phenomenal designer. But as he's talked about how AI has allowed him to enhance what he already could do, but either just took too long to take it to that point, or there were just certain skills that were moving so fast he just wasn't able to keep up. And he's like, AI actually allows me to stay ahead of the curve and do things that before I would have thought were impossible. So it's great to see that in general, even the masses are recognizing like, hey, this is really extremely helpful for things. People are using it to find answers, which again, I'll talk about the cautionary piece. Summarizing, fantastic. I love even these videos. I use OpenAI's GPT-4 to take all the transcripts from the video content I create and help me create condensed versions of it so that somebody who doesn't have time to watch a 60-minute video of me can say, hey, what were the bullet points from this? Even some of the planning stuff. I don't know that I personally would hand over the planning of my day to it, but I can see also really helpful things where it can look for patterns, find opportunities for people who are already overburdened and burned out and say, hey, can you just help me figure out how to make this fit, and get some really helpful suggestions. Now, here's my cautionary piece of it. When you're in a state of desperation, you're not always making wise decisions. So at a state where so many people are burned out, overwhelmed, not in a great place from a well-being standpoint, Can the promises of artificial intelligence lead people to make short sighted decisions and maybe not think critically about what they're handing off and how they're incorporating artificial intelligence? Yes. And I think that's a real risk right now. I ultimately think that is one of the biggest risks right now is that many people may not be in the best state of mind to be deciding how artificial intelligence is used in their work. And so this is one of the things that I would caution anybody watching or listening to take into consideration is make sure you are pressure testing some of this stuff. Make sure you were looking at, hey, what am I not thinking about? What are the potential risks of this kind of stuff? Again, analytics. It's great that 80% of people are comfortable handing over analytical tasks to artificial intelligence. Be careful that you're not handing over the wrong analytical tasks. Be careful that you're not allowing artificial intelligence to make decisions because you're just too tired and exhausted to think about it. So, whatever AI comes up with, I'm sure it's fine. Even the one around questions and answering, using artificial intelligence to seek out information and answers. Be so careful with this. There is so much bad information out there. And on top of it, look up AI hallucinations. They're real. They happen all the time. AI hallucinates. And because it doesn't know how to say, I don't know, it will just give a very authoritatively sounding answer to a question you may ask that is completely wrong. And so, in this state of vulnerability, in weakness, in just looking for something to help us keep our head above water, I think we need to be extremely, extremely careful how we start making decisions. And this goes to executives and just the general workforce. Senior leaders, they're just as overwhelmed and overburdened right now trying to figure out how are we going to navigate change, and our companies are blowing up business models, and now we got this tech wave. They're fried. Then they've got employees that are fried. So are we at a very high risk right now of people potentially making bad decisions just out of desperation because, hey, I don't know what to do right now, and so I'd rather just grab something that feels like a lifeboat than have to try and solve for this. And so anyway, that's just the caution piece there. Again, I'm extremely encouraged by the fact people are excited about the possibilities, that they're looking for creative ways to use this. I would just encourage people to put some critical thought and discernment into where, how, and when you start using this stuff. So you don't end up in a situation where you actually make problems where they don't exist today. So I will stop there because I don't want to over exacerbate or over emphasize the risks. But I think when you look at the state of things right now, it is a real risk that needs to be considered. And as I think back on my life, some of the worst decisions I've made have been because I was in a not great place and was just looking for something to grab onto. So if you're making decisions about how to use artificial intelligence, just make sure you're doing things to mitigate that. Incorporate other people into the decisions. Make sure you're incorporating diverse perspectives. Do small scale experiments. Make sure you find intentional place points to put a human in the loop to make sure things don't go too far. Those kinds of things are going to be really important right now, especially in this stage now where one, you've got people who may not be in the best place to make decisions. Then you've got this just massive hype of everybody's got to be doing it, which is creating this artificial stress and pressure that can just lead to some bad things. So just be careful with that. I would caution folks on that one. Okay. I'm going to bring this one full screen because it's just way too small to see otherwise. But something else that I thought was really interesting was the way they broke down some of these jobs. So for those who may be thinking, okay, I understand artificial intelligence is coming. Christopher, I've listened to you say, yes, there's still only a small percentage of jobs that are going to be really specifically changed and disrupted and be AI focused. But you're also saying that every job is going to be disrupted and affected by artificial intelligence, or should. I thought this slide did a really good job of breaking down what some of that stuff looks like and showcasing And again, I think it picked a nice diverse group of jobs to show the difference in things. I think something it also shows is some of the lack of creativity we have right now around artificial intelligence, which I'll get to in a minute. But if you look at some of this stuff, going back to what I said earlier, that we went through this hype phase where, there was a time not that long ago where everyone was being pressured to learn coding skills. Everybody should be a coder. Everybody needs to know how to program. Everybody needs to know how to write code. And if you look, the number one job ripe for disruption, augmentable or replaceable by general artificial intelligence or generative AI, would be software engineering. And so you look at that, 96% of the work itself can be augmented or replaced by artificial intelligence. This is a huge thing. Artificial intelligence is writing its own code. And that's great. Again, in some ways, that's fantastic because, hey, speed, pace, being able to move, absolutely ripe for disruption. But I know a lot of folks who went into software engineering and have done very well in software engineering who now are going, ooh. And I talked to someone today who was just talking about they originally went into software engineering, and the difference was being a mediocre software engineer versus a phenomenal software engineer. The divide is huge. And so artificial intelligence is going to just further that gap. And so I think that's one of those ones where you got to look at some of these things and look further out. And that's why I say to folks who may be thinking, oh, I need to get on the AI bandwagon and go get a specialized certification or degree in artificial intelligence and machine learning, might not be a wise move, because the artificial intelligence will likely be writing its own code in the not near term future if it isn't already. And I think in some cases it already is. So you look at that and then you compare that to like an oil field operator, right? Where very little of its work is likely to be disrupted by things, because so much of the work itself is people skills and highly specialized skills that likely are not going to be prime targets for artificial intelligence. Because again, is artificial intelligence good at taking the mass broad spectrum and then making it applicable in certain areas? Yes. Super, super niche, hyper specialized things, it's not going to have the kind of data that it needs to be fantastic at doing what it can do to actually do that well. And that's where you're going to see things like an oil field specialist, or what's another one that I saw that's like really low, like, I don't know why environmental health and safety specialist was so low. But again, you look at some of this stuff and you go, okay, I can understand why that would be. So as you think about some of these things, you want to look at the jobs you're in and be objective about how you assess some of this stuff, because there's going to be different things, and you may disagree with some of this stuff, like a salesperson. Okay. It says 60% of their job could be augmentable by that. Now, I know some salespeople that would go, absolutely not. Sales is all about people. It is a people skills job, 100% people skills. There's no way that could be disrupted by artificial intelligence. But I've been in sales and I've led sales training many times. There are lots of activities that happen over the course of a day in a salesperson's job that has nothing to do with human interaction. Managing your CRM, planning out your, routes, like depending on the type of salesperson, like you may be planning like, okay, what customers am I going to see? It's logistics. It's paperwork and filing through, okay, I've got this order and I need to prepare a proposal for a client. Well, is that augmentable by artificial intelligence? Yeah, ideal for it. Could it be pulling together your proposal so that you don't have to sit and fill out in a Word document or something in eDocs? Yeah, of course you could. And then it can make it so all you need to do is review it and make sure it gets across. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of this stuff, where I'll see things and go, yeah, there's probably more to it. But I do agree that some of these jobs, being a nurse, hey, if you don't want to be disrupted, oil field operator, nurse, things like that, where really a majority of your work may be tied to direct human interaction, not necessarily ripe for AI disruption, great. But Largely, I think, again, even the jobs that have very low percentages, you're going to see that there are certain things that, you know what? Yeah, actually, when we actually think about the kind of work that's being done, that may be better suited for it. And again, does that mean your job goes away? No, because I would say even the ones that are ripe for disruption, let's take software engineer at the top, 96% potential for disruption, augmentation, whatever. The best software engineers I know, you're still going to want their eyes on that code. You're still going to want them QCing. You're still going to want them coming up with the ideas of, hey, what could we do to improve? Or having the relationship between the product team and the actual engineers to make sure that that communication breakdown there are still things that you're going to need a human in the loop. How much of that, how many people you'll need doing that? Yeah, are software engineers going to more likely be disrupted, and might they have to do different things than they did in the past than, say, an oil field operator? Probably, but I also know a lot more software engineers than I do oil field operators. So it's a much more specialized niche specialized skill set, less likely for disruption. So this to me was just a really great breakdown to help people start to think about, oh, okay, I can see how, some of this stuff might, be really not how you may break it down and how you can think about some of this stuff. But again, one thing that I will add to this as I looked through this, and feel free to look through it, it's probably too small to really look through too much on here, is the limitations of what artificial intelligence can do. In my take on that is it's only limited by our imagination. And so when I look at this report and I look at some of the things that it's highlighting as well, it'll disrupt this, it won't disrupt this. I still see a very legacy iterative way of thinking about what AI might be able to do and what it might not be able to do. And I think if I were to look at this in a couple years from now, it's going to be really interesting to watch this evolve as some things we're not even imagining could exist as part of a job, or things that we go, oh, there's just no way artificial intelligence could do that. And it starts to show us that it can. It's going to be interesting to see how these numbers shift over the years. And on the flip side, it's going to be interesting to see how many of these things that we go, oh, yeah, artificial intelligence can totally do that. Let's take software engineer. Oh, yeah, let's just let the machines code. What could possibly go wrong? How many of those things we're going to go through this cycle of we do it, it blows up, and then we got to go back and go, you know what? Actually, we should have more human involvement in this. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few years to watch as some of these we just go head first into augmentation and supplementation with AI, and then we swing back, versus others where we're super resistant and go, no, 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 there's just no way AI can do any of this. And then suddenly it's just the rug gets pulled out from people because they held on too long. So just some food for thought, definitely worth digging into. Again, I don't think any of this is comprehensive. Should you look at that and go, oh no, I'm in this industry and it says this percent, so that means I'm not going to have a job? No, but I think it's some good food for thought about how and where it might disrupt and some of the things you should be thinking about as you get into it. Um, I want to jump to this one here because I think this is really an important call out. Universally, and this is mapped not only with this data, but my conversations that I have and just other research reports I've seen. Almost every single senior leader I encounter says people skills are more important than they've ever been. I mean, this was before the AI boom of 2023, end of 2022. I mean, this is not a new conversation. People skills has historically always been the bane of executives' existence, where they go, gosh, if we could just get these people skills thing figured out, we'd be so much further along. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen to people being able to develop these, other than just that people don't necessarily want to do the work to it, is a lot of times people are strapped for time because they're so overburdened with some of this other stuff. And there has historically been this idea that people skills, there's almost been a disconnect where, and I will say, executives a lot of times talk out of both sides of their mouth, where they'll say people skills are more important than ever. But I got to get that report has to get done by tomorrow, drop everything to make that happen. And you go, well, wait a minute. Is having meaningful human interactions with people more important, or is getting this report done more important? And so you had the duality of, you're saying one thing, your behaviors and what I'm being held accountable to is another thing. You're holding me accountable to all the tactical things, yet you're saying, oh, why aren't people leveraging their people skills? I think this is where AI is really going to help close that gap between, well, I say I need this, or I say I want this, yet my accountability and actions are demonstrating what I really want is this. Because I think AI is going to be able to fill some of that need for the tactical. Well, I need this presentation. Can you reformat it in this? Okay, fine. Have AI do it in 30 seconds so that the people can use more of their time. Hey, let's use this time to help understand, what are you really trying to influence? What are you really trying to get across? I'm not going to worry about spending all my time trying to close the gaps and make sure the word's right and wordsmith all this stuff. I'll let AI do that. So I think this is going to help it. But what I do think it reinforces is, hey, people skills is where to put your money. If you're going to invest your time in your development, it should be around your people skills, your interpersonal skills. Look at the stat right there. Communication is the top skill in almost all job postings. It does not surprise me one bit, because no matter how smart and skilled you are, if you suck at communication, you will not perform well in the job. I can't think of how many people I have hired who have been brilliant over the last 2 decades that if they weren't a good communicator, they were mediocre at best in terms of how they overall performed on the team. They might have been a wizard, but if they couldn't communicate, it really didn't matter. And so, one, I think for executives and people in hiring manager positions, make sure you're putting your money where your mouth is, because I do think there is a tendency to say we want to see these interpersonal human skills, but then we reward and reinforce that what we really want is just to get the stuff done. So be careful of that. But for those of you who might be on the job seeker market, taking the time to invest in your human skills, your interpersonal, specifically communication. But one of the ones that's called out there, if you look at it, professional ethics has grown as an in-demand skill. That is my prediction. That is only going to rise. As artificial intelligence comes onto the workforce, one of the things I continue trying to beat the drum on is, who's defining truth for artificial intelligence, and how are those ethical and moral decisions being made? And that is going to become an in-demand skill for who knows how to navigate those philosophical, ethical things around, hey, how do we decide what to do? How do we make sure we're mitigating bias in these large language models? How do we make sure we're making smart decisions that don't have long-term consequences down the road? Going back to something I said earlier, people aren't in the best state to make decisions about how this technology should be used. The people who are really skilled at knowing how to do that, who can navigate that ethically, who can, again, social perception is right up there, who are very perceptive and then can communicate it. You crush those skills, you're going to be at the top of the pile in terms of marketability. And I think that's going to stick. That's my prediction. But that's not a prediction that, I see the future. That's been true for as long as I've been in the workforce. So something, though, that I think the report really emphasizes here. Couple more things that I just want to add is the report gives some advice to job seekers and hirers for how you can use AI to improve economic opportunity. Now, they're specifically referencing how LinkedIn is incorporating some of this into the tool to help people, but they're also making some recommendations on what job seekers and hiring managers can do to leverage artificial intelligence for this. The advice in general is good, but I would take it with caution. So the advice to job seekers is, hey, you can use artificial intelligence to create, messages to interact with people on LinkedIn so that you can send direct messages and send a message to the hiring manager introducing yourself and explaining why you're interested in the job. And you can use it to fill out your profile so you have a robust profile that accurately describes what you do and all this other stuff. Good suggestions. On the hirer's side, it's recommending like, hey, you can use artificial intelligence to help create meaningful job descriptions that are more robust and describe what's being done. And you, instead of going like, I don't have time to look at a job description, just grab whatever HR has and throw it out there. Artificial intelligence can help you go, hey, you know what? I don't have time to rewrite this whole job description, but let me take a look at it and go, you know what? I actually would revise or tweak it because this is really more what I'm looking for in a candidate. Those I think are all great suggestions. At the same time, if you look at what this previous slide I just talked about said, interpersonal human skills are paramount. Do not relegate your interpersonal communication and the way, again, even a job description, it's communication. You're describing to someone what you're looking for in someone who's going to do this job. You're also describing what this job is. You should not be just assuming a machine can do that and do it well. Just like if you're a job seeker and you're like, I want to reach out to a potential hiring manager, I want to create a robust profile for myself. To just think AI is going to do that and do it well, and you can just, rubber stamp it and be done, I would just be really careful. I think, again, going back to what I said before, at a time when people are burned out, not in the best state of mind, these can be really tempting offers. They can be perceived easy buttons that you can just, hey, sweet, I just hit the button, bam, I can have these great communication, bam, I can have a great job description. With all the risks of AI, with hallucination, with just AI not being a person, there's not a human voice to it. And soon things just sound robotic because it's not really written by a person. It's real. So just absolutely leverage AI to help augment and help you with some of these things, especially if these were things where in the past you would just go, like the job description, I don't even have time to write a job description. I'm just going to take whatever HR wants to pull off our job description thing from some job that's related and like, yeah, good enough. Just put it out there. Okay. Not what you should do. Use AI to make it more accurate. Should you just say, AI, write me a job description for whatever, and here, good enough. Okay, you're doing the same thing. AI is not actually enhancing or helping. So be careful with that. Same thing with a job seeker. Don't just send AI messages that you didn't even write to someone because, hey, AI sounded really good. It's not me. It doesn't sound like me. It's nothing I would actually say to someone. But hey, any message is better than no message. Careful. That's all I will say to that. Just be really careful. Now, last and finally, the report does talk about some of the opportunities that LinkedIn specifically has created for folks. And they are, if you aren't a LinkedIn premium member, if you are, you know you have access to LinkedIn Learning. If you're not, one thing I really appreciate about LinkedIn is they make a lot of courses accessible and free to non-LinkedIn premium members, especially when they see areas where they go, hey, this is a really important area. We want to make this accessible to everybody because people need it. And look, we can do that. Like it's a benefit that we can offer to people. They do a really good job of this. And they've listed some really good courses in here. The courses are solid. And I think a lot of them are free. Again, don't quote me on it. And the text is way too small for me to sit and read through it. But one that I know they are offering for free through 2025 is the professional certificate on generative AI. And it's a partnership between LinkedIn and Microsoft. They've joined together and they said, hey, let's create this comprehensive certificate of, I think it's like 5 or 7 courses that you take it, you pass this comprehensive exam and you get a verified certificate from them on generative AI. I personally can speak to it because I've taken it. I took the time to go through all the courses. I will tell you, it's a decent chunk of time. It is a commitment. So, like anything, if you want to develop, it takes work. Just like if you want to get in shape, it takes work. You can't, there's no easy button for it. But having personally taken it, it's a good certification. It's comprehensive. It's robust. It doesn't take too much time. The one thing I always will warn people about with it is that there's a comprehensive assessment at the end, and you only get 3 tries. So, if you're paying attention and you're engaged in the content, you'll do just fine. But I warn people because, hey, if digital learning, having been in this space for a long time, I know how easy it is to just, you open the thing, you let it play, and then you get to the end and you think, oh, I'll just pass the test. You won't pass the test. If you just leave the thing run to show that you went through stuff and then think, oh, I'll just pass the test at the end, you won't. But it is a solid course. It will lay a strong foundation of what generative AI is, how it works, some ways that you may be able to incorporate it into your job and your life in healthy and effective ways. It does a good job balancing the ethics of it as well. Overall, it's a really balanced certificate. And I would encourage people to do it, and it's free. So if you're watching this going, hey, Christopher, where is a good opportunity to develop? Well, there you go. That's the one that I would probably recommend to most folks. So with that, hopefully you found this helpful. Like I said, I will put the link to the actual report in the comments, or in the description, so that you can download the report if you're interested in actually seeing the physical report. But hopefully this breakdown helps you better understand what's in the report, gives you some ways to how to think about it, and what things that you may want to take and what things you may want to take and go, I'll think a little bit more about it before I actually do anything with it. So with that, I hope you found this helpful, and we will see you on the other side.